Osoro, the proprietor of the pub, had allegedly confiscated the mobile phone of the officer as security for the unpaid bill. The father of two told journalists that the police officer came to his bar and had several drinks for which he declined to pay. The officer is said to have left the bar and headed.
Well, we do apologize for that. And with more and more women failing to conclude or to get into the parliamentary seats, well, to clinch the party tickets, it's just concluded primaries. It is becoming more and more evident that this is a challenge. But President Uhuru has determined to have the way forward, even as the country heads to a general election in August.
And this explains why he's recently directed the National Assembly Majority Leader Aden Duale to prioritize the passage of legislation to implement the constitutional two-thirds gender rule. All MPs resume House sittings Tuesday next week.
But this will not be the first time the bill is finding its way onto the floor of the House, having flopped twice. And this morning, we do have with us Josephine Mungare, who is the feeder chairperson, we're going to have that conversation. Remember, today, also on the State of the Nation, this was mainly what we were talking about, the two-thirds gender rule. And thank you for joining us, Josephine, this morning. And basically, let's first of all start with your feeling of the progress that we have so far on having this two-thirds gender principle achieved.
Well, you know that it has been a long struggle for the women of Kenya. After 2010, the Attorney General went to court and sought the famous opinion from the Supreme Court when the court, by a majority of 4, ruled that it was supposed to be implemented progressively, but in 5 years. That was to end in 2015. In 2015, Parliament was not able to achieve that. In 2016, they gave themselves an extension for 1 year. Now, that 1 year extension ended in 2016. We, as the women movement and the human rights people, came together and started lobbying Parliament, together with then the Association of Women in Parliament, KEWOPA, to make sure that there was a law. And we developed several laws. You know the famous Duale 1 bill, which actually went and garnered 195 votes as opposed to 233, which was what was required, the two-thirds threshold in Parliament. And that was the nearest we came to actually having a legislative measure in Parliament. This was a negotiated bill. This was a law that had been agreed upon by all sectors, and even Parliament was comfortable with it. Because we had other proposals. We had the bill from the Chepkonga-led Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, which the women movement felt that it wasn't going to address the immediate implementation of two-thirds. So by and large, when the presidency comes and says we must have this bill passed into law, we are hopeful that something will happen.
Now, the thing is, we can't fully rely on hope because we already have 2 deadlines that have not been met. So from the panel that we had this morning, it was coming out clearly that what may be lacking from the political leaders is the goodwill.
It's exactly the same thing that is lacking.
Yes.
Because even with Duale Bill 1, the president directed that it be passed.
Yes.
What did the president do that day? He went to Kisii and took half of the Nyanza Jubilee MPs with him. So we had no quorum.
But I mean, even when you talk about political goodwill, let's look at the cabinet. I mean, when the president reconstituted the cabinet, that immediately fell below the two-thirds gender threshold. Taking a look at the constitution of political parties, it's the same thing. I mean, the NASA outfit has also been criticized for having 5 male, core principals instead of also having a woman in that mix. When you take a look at the nomination list that was forwarded to IEBC, more than 1,000 aspirants looking to clinch senatorial and gubernatorial positions. Only 152 of those were women. And so in terms of political will, really, are we seeing this implemented from the top presidency?
If the presidency wants it implemented, it will be implemented. Because that's where political will starts. If the leadership in this country, that is the presidency, there's no other leadership, wants two-thirds bill to be passed, it will be passed. And that's why we are saying at this time, we are relying on hope. After that, if it fails and we see that there's no political will, then of course we move the legal machinery. The courts have been very, very positive. They have been very, very receptive about all the cases that have been, and a lot of cases have been filed on the two-thirds agenda against the cabinet not being properly constituted, the Supreme Court, and all other areas, including even the National Police Service. A lot of cases have been filed. But if we had the president saying, this is my political agenda, this is the agenda for the country, it would be passed.
Assuming what you're saying is accurate to the fact that the president maybe has not pulled his weight as much as he could, as much as he should, and assuming he does not do that, because we have a deadline of 30th of this month, what is the way forward? What redress can be sought? Can then this be moved to a higher court or a higher jurisdiction than just the Kenyan?
Or is the debate we're looking to have again in 2022?
No. We have a ruling from Justice Mativo, and luckily it has not been appealed against, which says that if this is not achieved in 60 days, which, as you know, ends at the end of this month, we have the opportunity to move the Chief Justice to ask for a dissolution of Parliament. Now, people are saying, how do you dissolve a Parliament that is two months to re-election? Even when that new Parliament is re-elected, we will still have that opportunity to have it dissolved unless there's a mechanism to make sure that we achieve the two-thirds agenda. Where are we now? If you look at how, and I'm not a parliamentary expert, but if you look at how laws are introduced in Parliament, a bill has to lapse if it has been defeated on the floor, like the Duale Bill 1, has to wait for 6 months before it's reintroduced. Now, the last Duale 1 bill is ready for reintroduction because it was defeated in August last year. 6 months have lapsed, and there is no need to draft a new bill. There's already a bill that can be introduced next week, and with political will, as we've seen in other laws that the government once passed, it can be passed.
All right, so are you confident that the 60 days will not lapse before that is done from where you're seated?
I'm not sure.
You're not
this
sure?
Is Kenya.
Because as it is, even
this is Kenya, and we've seen efforts from all quarters to just beat down the woman.
Because legal experts say there are loopholes within that constitutional provision that may probably frustrate this entire process. And you're not a legal expert, of course, but I'm sure you're aware of these loopholes. Are these things that can be solved before the lapse of this deadline?
All we are saying is that if the government wants the law passed, it can be passed by Parliament.
All right.
So all we need is goodwill?
All we need is goodwill. Okay. Everything else can be addressed. The loopholes can be addressed on the floor of the House in Parliament. Whatever needs to be cleaned in the bill can be cleaned. But if there is political will, it should be passed.
Although the fact that it is actually enshrined in the Constitution, it becomes law. And as a result, the law is assuming that should there not be goodwill, should we be in a patriarchal environment that does not want to push the two-thirds gender principle, it must be done. So we cannot leave it to goodwill.
Gitonga, if you remember, in 2013, we did not achieve one-third representation in the county assembly. And we had to go to court as a women movement. FIDA and other women organizations went to court to force IEBC and the political parties to order that women be the top-ups. And that was achieved because Article 177 made it very clear that you could not have a county assembly unless you had one-third gender representation. So what we ended up with, a lot of women who were all nominated. Now, Article 26, the 27 that talks about non-discrimination and ensuring that legislative and affirmative, legislative measures are put in place to allow affirmative action for two-thirds to be achieved is where the problem lies. But experts have argued, lawyers have argued that it is a self-actualizing mechanism. If you do not get two-thirds, you should automatically top up. We've seen in the past, even some parties, when they're supposed to bring people with disability or women, they bring men. So people have to, everybody, including IEBC, must play its role, even at that supervisory level, and say, if your party list requires that you bring women because you do not promote them through the election process, you must bring women.
Okay.
Yes.
I think we'll have to wind it up right there. And I think a good place to finish would also be to remind the electorate they also have a responsibility. We're going to the elections, and women are going to be, putting themselves there for election.